people who are my supporters, I never say the word fan, but those of you who are my supporters, I'm doing this on Facebook Live, which is actually a part of a class. I don't know the name of the class. Maybe Gail could tell me what the name of the class is, but.
Sure, let me give you an introduction also.
Okay.
So the class is HD 475, which is arts for social change. I like to think of it as arts as social change, but you know that's what I think. And Rasheed Ali is, if you didn't have a chance to look at any of the videos, he is a very talented artist who, I'll just read you his bio. He's an award-winning musician, an artist, and educator. He started playing saxophone and flute as a child and quickly mastered the family of reed instruments. He's also an accomplished keyboardist and percussionist. He's performed around the world alongside some of the artists of the last century. And his work, 1968 Soul Power, Black Power, and Love Power, combine his artistry as a music maker, a film editor, in a type of new form of docu-music. And he also is a historian. I want to say historian. He grew up in New York City in the projects, and he said, we didn't have a telephone or a car, but they had a strong sense of community. He attended the FAME School, Music and Art High School. In the early 70s, he created his first band called Natural Essence. And he has opened for musical icons like Isaac Hayes, Donny Hathaway, and Herbie Hancock. He surrounded himself with musical giants, Wayne Shorter, Cannonball Adderley, and Herbie Hancock. The sons of Nat Adderley and Thelonious Monk were his bandmates. He used to perform in his rehearsal space was the basement of the Apollo Theater in New York City. The Beatles producer Sid Bernstein promoted his band. And he moved into Los Angeles and worked as a sideman, which is, a musician who works in a band, and also a studio musician. He's done a variety of musics, everything from Caribbean to Latin music. He's recorded in Spanish, Portuguese. He's got an African world music compilation. And this 1968 Soul Power kind of brings it back home for him in time and space because his roots are in soul and funk. So I've given you the introduction, and now let's talk to the artist. Hopefully you have some questions for him about his work. Hopefully you've seen maybe the video. If not, we can all see it collectively. And let's hear from the artist.
Thank you for the introduction. The 1968 trilogy was an attempt by me to make a kind of a quintessential history, a living history, using music, living history through music. And when I first released it in 2015, oddly enough, it seemed to fall instantly on deaf ears here in the United States. And a good friend of mine, a real friend and brother, John Adams, said, let me give you a name of some people to play this for in Europe, and specifically in the United Kingdom. So that's what happened. The record wasn't doing anything here, but the minute it got to England, it kind of took on a life of its own. And thankfully, it's still growing. And it's been growing in many ways, but especially also in the sense of garnering some media attention. Media attention always seems so important to artists, just to at least get the idea out there that there's somebody making music that is anachronistic in many ways, but it's not derivative, and the vibe is not derivative because I actually was part of a cultural revolution in the 1970s. I was a teenager, but I was part of a cultural revolution that mirrored the social revolution that was happening with young people. And the whole idea for the 1968 project was to remind people who lived it that what it was like when they were young and activists, and because I'm an educator and I spent almost 15 years teaching, to let people who weren't there, young people like my kids, to let them know what it was like to be part of this kinetic time in history when young people were at the fore. Because in no other time in history did young people kind of move the discussion forward the way they did in the 1960s leading into the 1970s. So hopefully you understand what I'm saying, and ask away.
I know that Miss Donna has some questions for you.
How did you know? You know me so well. Actually, I was talking about this with my son earlier, and he was wondering, as I was wondering also, if you see any artists today that are sharing the same message only with current hip-hop music, like, let's see, Lil Wayne, Jay-Z, any artists like that who are also producing protest music. Do you see yourself sort of as a forefather to that kind of music?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, what got this whole project started was that my son, who's a filmmaker and an avid music listener, music consumer, was listening to some 70s music, and I said to him, I said, you do realize your dad's a 70s musician. That was the big joke. And he, just because of that, it seemed like I wanted to do this record almost as to let him know that whatever I came up with, before I came up with it, whatever I came up with wasn't going to be derivative. When I listened to like Jay-Z's new song about OJ, what's it called? The OJ Simpson song, Run OJ Run. I don't even know the name of it. But I love the video, and I love how he also used elements that I've been using in my videos, black and white stuff and stuff from the 60s. There's a sound. What is that?
Sorry, I think that's me.
Oh.
There's a nice food truck behind me.
He has an ice cream truck.
Nice.
An ice cream truck in his backyard.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, musician ears.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Distracted by music. So at any rate, I appreciate what those people who are younger than me do with so-called protest music, but it is kind of funny for me because it is very derivative, because they don't really know it the way I know it, but it's wonderful. And hey, they have a lot of juice, in my song Soul Power, I use an African quote that says the drum beats for the one in power.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah, the drum does beat for the one in power, okay? And Jay-Z is a billionaire, and hey, and his message will always be more important than Rasheed Ali's message at this point in time. And that's cool too. But I don't know if I see myself as any precursor or anything, because I love hip hop, and I was at the beginning of hip hop. I just saw today that it said 40 years of hip hop, and I started laughing to myself because Google was promoting 40 years of hip hop, and I'm thinking, well, I was there, and I remember when hip hop started, and hip hop was just built upon what young people like me were already doing, except for it was being a New Yorker, I know that it was built by kids who didn't have access to instruments. So it's all part of the same thing. Originally, hip-hop had a very strong protest, so you say the word protest, or social or socio-political message. But of course, as it became more and more prominent, and now it's it's homogenized and it's everywhere. I mean, hip hop is everywhere. Hip hop is on every commercial. So it's no longer has that edge to it that it had originally. So I would say that I appreciate you mentioning me, and I've done hip hop interviews, and I always tell people I am a hip hop musician in the classical sense of the word, because they're using James Brown. Originally, they were using James Brown beats, and hey, that's my generation of young cats. We were listening to Sly, and we were listening to what James Brown was doing, but we were younger, so we were kind of a lost generation. I think a lot of musicians in my era were in between generations in a weird sense, because we were too young to be hippies, too old to be b-boys, so we're somewhere in the middle.
So many describe the year 1968 as probably one of the most revolutionary years. Can you talk a little bit about how you see, like, why 1968?
Well, I use 1968 more like a pin drop in history, like one of those Apple phone pin drops, because it was a pivotal year. It was a very provocative year. Unfortunately, it was a year filled with violence, and oftentimes violence in the real world of the human animal, violence, we have a great memory for violent things, violent events. So in April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King, who was the man of peace, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, was assassinated. And that was in itself something quite disturbing to young people in my generation, because we had already seen President Kennedy assassinated in '63, and those of us like me who were part of this whole young Black intelligentsia and movement, we were devastated when Malcolm X was assassinated in '64. So by '68, to see that both the man of peace and the one who said by any means necessary were both assassinated, it became like cosmic twins or something. And then in June 6, 1968, Robert Kennedy was assassinated. We had a My Lai massacre in Vietnam, which was one of the events that drew so much attention to atrocities in Vietnam that it was almost like a fulcrum for turning a lot of people against the war who previously had not been against the war. So, so much happened in '68. There many people say that Martin Luther King was targeted because he was about to change the message from a smaller civil rights movement that started with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in the South, and expanding it after he was a Nobel Prize winner to include the Poor People's Campaign, which was scheduled to begin a month from when he was assassinated. And what was the Poor People's Campaign? The Poor People's Campaign was his realization that what we now fast forward to a couple of years ago called the 99%, right? That the majority of society is disenfranchised, and there's a very small minority that controls all the wealth in most of the world. And he was about to say that, and it was a pivotal thing, because the world had come, the people of America, it was a colorless movement. There were hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, and there were all kinds of people, and there were Black people, there were Latinos there were white people, there were Asians. Everybody was coming together and everybody was in the street. And the Poor People's Campaign was going to build upon that to say, hey, it's not about race, fools. It's about social justice. That's why I picked 68. It was an incredibly dynamic year. I knew, even though I was a kid at the time, I knew that it was going to be powerful. And ironically, I wrote a poem in high school, and I called it 1968 and the teacher looked at me like, like that happened a couple of years ago. What's with 1968? And I told her, I said, 1968 is going to be remembered forever.
All right.
I feel vindicated.
Miguel, do you have any questions for?
Yeah. So just kind of going back off of what you're saying about 1968 having a lot of different, people from different ethnicities, races coming together. So that, I saw the video and there was a lot of examples of that, where it said black and brown together, supporting one another. And I feel like now that's forgotten, right? So, unless you're really a community activist or really heavily involved, how do you remind either young people or people in the community at large that it happened in the past and we can do it again? Because I think that's where there's a big divide, right? It's an us against them, and then it almost feels like it's a divide and conquer strategy.
Oh, it surely is. It surely is. I mean, you couldn't be more right. People call that. I know that people in the Caribbean, where I'm from, they call that crabs in a barrel, right?
Yeah.
And if you've ever seen, when I was a kid, my father took me to see some crabs, and I said to him, Daddy, how come there's no cover? How come the crabs, there's hundreds of crabs in this big open space, but they can't get out? He said, because when one tries to get out, one pulls them down.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the mentality of crabs in a barrel is very prevalent. How do we get beyond that? I think, I don't know, it's a thing, it's a different perception.
Yeah.
We might have a different perception. I mean, I look at myself, I happen to be Black, but I also happen to be Latino, and I'm a Spanish speaker, an English speaker. So I think people like me, we do our best to bridge the gap, but even we can't always do that.
Yeah.
Because there's still somebody always looking at us, not liking us.
Yeah. Yeah.
My friend was Dominican, and he got arrested, and he had never been arrested before, and his first day in the holding jail or pen, whatever they call that, downtown LA, the Black people who were Black Americans, they didn't dig him. Mm-hmm. And the Latinos that were mostly Central American, they didn't relate to him because unlike being in New York with a lot of Black Latinos, right, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, or Dominicans, he was in the middle, and I'll never forget that he was crying. And he said it was deep. He said I was somewhere in the middle, and everybody was hating me. So I give you that as an example of what we're up against. Mm-hmm. But I do think more and more, it depends, like I said, on perception. I see a blending in art, but I don't see that same blending on the streets. And if we live in LA, we know that what has happened in LA, for instance, is that Inglewood used to be Black. Mm-hmm. Inglewood's not Black anymore.
Yeah.
Inglewood is not Black anymore. It is now at least 50%. Watts and Inglewood and that whole area is at least 50% Latino. Mm-hmm. And And before, and you notice that I don't say Mexican because people who are not Latinos, they're always saying Mexican.
Yeah.
But I have friends, El Salvador, Nicaragua, on and on, Belize, Honduras, Panama, whatever. So we are up against this. We're up against this feeling of people trying to balkanize the social message. So that you have competing groups. I've done a lot of work with nonprofits, and you asked me what did I try to do? I would always try to bridge the gap. When we had meetings, I would have people be able to, and they tell their digital stories. We used to do digital storytelling. I would tell them, look, you tell your story in Spanish and I'll help you, and we'll do, I wanted people to be authentic. Your neighbors don't understand you, you speak in Spanish, and I'll help you with the translation. We'll put the translation on the screen. But you go ahead and be authentic. Same thing, I've done work with even Cambodian people from Watts. I told them, say, tell your story. People in the LBC, in Long Beach. Mm-hmm. So, it's about understanding who other people are. Yes. When I was a teacher, I had one kid in Watts. I was teaching a art class in Watts, and there was one kid in the whole class. He was Cambodian. He was so quiet. He didn't want to speak. And I came in one day and I said, do you guys know where he's from? And they said, no. I said, hey, man, he's from Kampuchea. Do you know the history? After that day, kids found out about his country. They found out about Cambodia. All these kids, Black Latino kids in that classroom, he became like a superstar just because I acknowledged him and said, hey, man, do you know where he's from? Do you know his history?
So what I hear you saying is that music education kind of will bridge that gap and bring the masses together, which is pretty idealistic. What do you think it's idealistic? Because I'm going to say this. I teach at a primarily or predominantly white school. And in this predominantly white school, they listen to hip hop, they listen to Jay-Z, they listen to what I think is revolution music without any consciousness. Without any consciousness. So how does the consciousness begin? Because I know I'm trying to make the consciousness happen. I'm right now in the trenches trying to write a grant so that I can get these white kids to talk, these white wealthy kids, to talk to kids in South Central about the same issues, which is families working. Our families have to work. Our families are not with us. Our families are busy. Now, busy in La Cañada looks like, daddy's a lawyer. Busy in South Central, daddy is a mechanic, but they both work. And they both work for the same means to provide for their family. So I'm trying to bridge those gaps earlier than adulthood. So what do you think are some of the ways that music can bridge those gaps? And this is kind of, piggybacking on Miguel's question.
Well, I do believe that on the one, what you said is very illuminating and very true. And of course, I've seen it. The irony is, for instance, the irony can be found in who engaged with my own work, right?
True. That's true. You've got a very large following in London, and a very white audience.
Yeah, it's 90% white audience, and my friend Akio, who's with Jurassic 5. One day we were talking about audience, and he said the irony is, he said, look at the high profile Jurassic 5 has had. He said he took a picture, one of those selfies on the stage, and he sent it to me. There was not one black face in the audience. So we know that this phenomena occurs daily. That we have. I'm sure that if you go to a Jay-Z concert, we're going to be mostly white here in America and elsewhere. So where's the disconnect? In America, the disconnect is that, and this goes back to a long way, and you're asking a very deep question about the history of America, and it's about the minstrel show.
Yeah.
And it's about...
You went there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I had to go there. And it's about being able to appreciate the minstrel show, but not take it home.
Yeah. Bang.
You know?
He said that. He said that.
I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
it's a reality, and it's very historic, and it's very much a part of American culture. So with that, I say that it's a double-edged thing, though, because we could say that along with the browning of America that so many people are resisting, because what Barack Obama's presidency really stood for was that so many families in America have a beige, yellow, brown, black relative more than ever. That's a reality. You can fill in the blanks with all you want. So, and my friends in hip hop will say hip hop was responsible for that.
Because there was an openness of not black people so much as white people.
Well, you know,
Just people.
I saw a documentary of hip hop in Mongolia, right?
That's true.
Okay. Now, the Palestinian kids in the Gaza, they relate to hip hop because they feel like, hey, yeah, you know, and they even call each other nigga. And I don't even like using that word, but they do. And they think, just like those white kids, when I was teaching in the Valley, I was teaching some poor white kids, and they were calling each other nigga. And one day I said to them, stop at that. Now, you know, Mr. Ali, I mean, we all niggas. So that's fine.
So hold on a second. This meeting is going to end at 9:26. So what we'll have to do is I'll have to regroup because you get 40 minutes for free.
Okay.
And then, so if that happens, we'll regroup. Is that okay with you guys?
Sure.
Okay, cool. So
anyway,
it might just abruptly end, and then I'll have to re-invite everybody.
No, I understand. And just to tie up, to tie it up in a bow, I'm just pointing to the fact that we could say that music has been very responsible. I know that when we talk about my work in 1968, one of the most incredible things about when I was a teenager was that I used to go to the Fillmore Auditorium, right? And when I used to go to the Fillmore, it was a mix. There were long-haired hippies, black kids, there was every kind of kid. But mostly, like, it looked like my school, because my school was like that. My school was very mixed, and it was a creative school, and a lot of the kids were what you would call white hippie kids, and the black kids had big afros, but we were all one. Okay, so when you had shows, and it started with like Monterey Pop, and so Jimi Hendrix playing on the bill with the Who and the Rolling Stones or whatever, there was a lot less racism in the programming of the music.
Ooh.
Which I'm trying to get to, see, that's where my man was coming from before, asking about this, this segmentation. There was less of this whole market segmentation thing going on in a certain period of the 60s and 70s, where you would go see a festival, you could see anybody.
Santana.
Yeah. Oh, you kidding? You kidding? Santana, Sly, Otis Redding. So this idea of musical segmentation, I think, does reflect on society, and eventually, what happens is people start to say, "Oh, I only relate to hip hop," and then that becomes its own little bubble. And other people say, I only listen to hard rock. And other people say, you know what I mean? I listen to death metal. And then they have these, I only listen to house. No, I only listen to funky house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what happens is you keep slicing the cake skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. Instead of having one beautiful cake, now you got all these little teeny weeny cakes that don't satisfy.
Mm. Mm. Wow. Okay.
That's my perception as an artist.
All right. So, wow. Okay. Donna, you look like your mind is exploding.
Well, there's so many things I could relate to when he was speaking just now. Like, I spent a lot of time in radio. Mm-hmm. And I remember we had several stations in the cluster, and one was a country station. And we had a listener call in because they were very angry because we played a nigga music commercial on the country station. Whoa. And I was like, what the hell? I could not even grip the idea. But just because we played an urban sounding commercial in a country western music stop set, they were just losing it and not changing stations, and we hate the station now. And I was like, wow. This was in Texas, of course. It might happen anywhere, but this was in Texas. But it just really floored me how the segmentation, country western should not have urban commercials.
Wow.
You know what's so sad about that too, with that particular story? There's so many Chicanos and black people that live down there that all they listen to is country music.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You kidding?
Yeah.
They love it. You know what I'm saying?
I was floored. I didn't even know what to say. I was like, how do I even respond to that? I couldn't even speak.
Right. I know how you feel. And so I'm just exposing the insanity of it all.
Mm-hmm.
You see, the insanity of it all is culture is really bigger than that. Culture is so much bigger than race. And that's actually what you just mentioned. That's actually part of what my work is about. My work has always been about culture being bigger than race. Mm-hmm. I don't like intergroup racism. You know, like I said before, like I'll give Latinos the forum on this because I can speak from experience. There are people who say things like, "Oh, I didn't know you were Latino," because they're very fair-skinned, and say, "Oh yeah, well, my grandmother was darker than me, and she didn't speak any English." You know, and so I'm always in my work, but also I could show you one of my grandparents, and you would say, "Oh, he's white." And see, so I use myself as an example. If you follow what I'm saying, I use myself as an example to make sure that I'm always on even keel and fighting racism at every turn. Because you have black people who don't like this one because he's too light and this one because too dark. You have white people who don't like this one because he's too light. He's swarthy complexion, olive complexion. And you don't like this one because he's ginger and you think he's too Irish or whatever. It's all stupid. It's all stupid. You know what? When we all die, you know what happens to us? The skin goes away, the bones are left, and when you look at the bones, you can't tell who the hell is who.
So I just posted a continuing the call, which is going to be available in 3 minutes and 8
Is that the orange box I see in the bottom of my screen? I see an orange box that says chat.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you guys can just copy that right now, and we're going to try this.
For those people
so we still have three.
I'm taking this off of Facebook, and I noticed that it keeps going off anyway because Facebook, Facebook doesn't like revolutionary people like me. So
you have too much energy.
Not too much energy for them. So it keeps going off. I'm sorry. I apologize to anybody who was on and they got frustrated because people are, telling me that it was intermittent. I kept seeing it go off. Not my fault. I'm sorry, but it will be. I'll be able to edit this because I am a video editor, and hopefully.
Yeah, when we come back, what I want to do is I want to take a look at and analyze and discuss one of your videos and song, and take a look at, because what I think is so incredible is it's this video archive, this historical video archive behind this incredible message. So when we come back, let's kind of take a look at that, because I'm trying to be all academic and stuff. And
the funniest thing, before we turn off, is that the funniest thing that I've learned I've been using all this public domain educational stuff. I've learned so much because I'm looking at
less than a minute to tell us what it is.
Okay. So it went off?
It's going off.
Okay, trying to click on the other one now.
I'm supposed to click on the orange one?
Yes.
Oh, is that what you do?
Yes.
There's Michelle. Okay.
Okay. And I'm just sending a message to your classmates again. There I go. All right. And I'm going to click on the orange message too.
The only hardcore people on this call. That's okay.
And I'm going to end the call. Well, actually, yeah, I'm going to end the call, and then we're going to jump on the other call. It might be a minute before it happens, so let me just do that now. We'll be back. I feel like we're on the a TV radio. We'll be back in a few minutes.
3, 2, 1.
There we go.